I guess the first thing, if I'm starting a brand new project, nothing else, I'm going to start with going to my GitHub. We're going to then choose new repository. I'm not even trying to do any templates or anything like that. And we're just going to call this, say, web 26. I don't know. We'll just say intro. Yeah, sounds good. And we'll say flow. And we're going to make this so it's a public repository. I'm going to go ahead and add a README file just because it'll make it a lot easier for me to clone it. Most of this stuff's going to get overwritten anyway. As for license, we're going to use MIT because that's what Lambda likes to use, since this is a Lambda video. So we're going to go ahead and create the repository. Now, this is just the straight up repo. All it's got is just a license and a README file in it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to copy our clone path, and I'm going to be changing directories to my projects directory. And I'm going to go ahead and, let's see, I think I've already got a web pt26 directory. I do. And I'm going to do git clone and then paste in the web26 intro react git path. And change directories into that. And open up VS Code by doing code space period. Code space period, the space period is the current directory, and code is just VS Code. And I'll probably need to shrink this down just a little bit. Okay, so we have just our regular VS Code. If you notice, we've got a README file with some junk in it. Nothing really all that interesting. So since we're in the Web26 Intro to React directory on our terminal, what we can do is we can type in a different command that you guys have seen before. It's called npx. So what npx is going to do is it's kind of like npm, but it's running it from an external source, or it's going to copy it and run it here, but it's not installed locally, but it's going to execute this this application that's going to create a React app. So we're going to do create -react -app. So that's the package that we're going to run, and then we're going to try to install it in our root directory, which we're in the Web26 Intro to React directory, which is again period, which is the current directory that you're in. Okay, so the first thing you'll notice is that it overwrote my README file. That's why I didn't really care about it, but I just wanted something in there so I didn't have to go through and do like a git init on this directory and then set my origin and all this other stuff. It just makes it a lot easier if GitHub does all the work for you by making a file already in there, and you just clone it and start using it. Now we have a React application that's installed, and it should have some basic scaffolding to make an actual app. So all I need to do is just do npm start, and this should execute the React server and bring up a web page on our local machine. And we have our spinning React logo. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a new terminal. I'm going to go ahead and check out a branch. I'm not going to use my first name dash last name on this just because I'm not going to be doing the same exact workflow, but the same idea. So you can kind of get a better idea of, having one branch for everything. So I'm going to do a git checkout minus b makes a new branch, and we're going to call this. So CRA is create React app minus cleanup or dash cleanup is what we're about to do. I'm going to go ahead and add this. Commit with a message. So the minus M is for the message. And we're going to say create React app finished. And we're going to do a git push origin CRA dash cleanup. So if I go back over to GitHub, it'll say CRA cleanup had recent pushes less than a minute ago. And I'm going to go ahead and compare and pull request. The number one thing that a lot of people do is they accidentally try to, or pull request into the place that they forked it from. You want to make sure that base is your main or your master, and your compare is going to be whichever branch you're currently working on. And then in here, you can write comments. We're just going to do cleanup scaffolding from create React app. So I'm going to create a pull request. I'm going to go ahead and assign myself to it because why not? It's my repo. I can do whatever I want. But I'm not going to merge this just yet. And the reason for that merge is I still want to do some changes to the structure of this and clean it up so it looks a little bit less, I don't know, React appy. So kind of the first thing that I like to do is I like to look at the folder structures on these. You have your README file, which is just a README file. They've got the old README file. We can get rid of that because it was just there for me to have a lazy way of getting GitHub to clone over to my machine. License is still a MIT license. The package lock JSON file is actually generated when you run your npm install. Same thing with this node modules folder. The node modules folder, we don't ever want that to be uploaded. So if we go here and we look at gitignore, this gitignore file, anything that's in this file, it's not going to send to GitHub. Your node modules folder, if that gets sent up, some of these node modules folders can get huge, gigabytes in some cases. You don't want to push that up to GitHub. You don't need a copy of it. It's not necessary. You've got a .pnp. Not entirely sure exactly what that is. Testing coverage directory. We don't want that uploaded. We don't want to, if we have built it, we don't want the production version of this web page to be uploaded. And there's other things like your local environment files. So anything that's a .env file probably isn't a good idea to put up, and log files. So DS store is usually on a Mac. The next folder down from node modules is public. If we look in public, there's a index.html file. Since we've all done DOM manipulation, you'll notice that this effectively only has this body, and then you have the div ID root. If we wanted to put anything into this using straight up DOM manipulation, we probably would use like a get element by ID and then have root in there. And then we could render anything that we want to this div. You don't really edit this file to make anything happen. You try to do things inside of the source directory. So going on with the tour, we've got the source directory, and we've got all these other files in here that aren't really necessary. The big one that we're looking for right here is the index.js. If I put our index.html on the right and the JS on the left, what this is doing is we're importing a whole bunch of stuff. We have this React DOM.render. And so this is where the DOM manipulation magic happens. All the stuff that you guys learned over the last 2 weeks happens inside of here. So we got strict mode. I'm actually going to be removing that. It's not really that important for what we're doing today. And we're rendering a component named app. But what's interesting here is you see this document.getElement by ID root. So it's grabbing this div ID root and it's rendering app inside of this div ID root. Lack of a better way of doing this, I'm going to start cleaning this up. We'll go ahead and close out of that. I'm going to also show what happens to the page while I'm doing this. And I'm probably going to have to restart the React app server while I'm doing this because it's pretty vicious what I'm about to do. So I'm going to just select everything, delete it out of the HTML file in public. I'm going to hit the exclamation point. And you'll notice that it comes up with an emit abbreviation, and I can just hit tab. That just gives us our doc type HTML. It gives us a viewport for our responsive code. And inside of body, I'm just going to make a new div. Class of container. Because I can. So I'm not doing an ID equals root anymore. I also don't have all of the no script, hey, you need JavaScript to see this. So we'll go ahead and save this. And instantly we get this target is not a DOM element. This is no longer div ID root. And because this is no longer div ID root, you're going to get this target container is not a DOM element. So if we want to fix this, we have to go back into index.js. And instead of get element by ID, we're going to do a query selector and make sure we have a class, so a period container. And we're going to save that. I'll probably have to refresh. Okay, so we've broken it and we've fixed it. We're going to break it some more because I can. So now we don't have a need for a favorite icon, so I can delete that. I don't need a logo 192. These are all things for different things like progressive web apps, things like that. Not worrying about robots. So in my public directory, all I have is index.html with some very basic things to make the system work. No more, no less. I can refresh this again and it works just fine. What we have is a very basic HTML document that we're doing DOM manipulation on exactly the way that we showed you earlier. If I right click on this and I go to inspect, and I look at my elements, you can see that we have our doc type HTML right at the top. We've got HTML lang English. We've got a header. Inside of the header, we've got 3 meta tags and a title. Title says document, and I'm going to go ahead and just change this, and we're just going to say fun with React. Save that. You'll notice now the title says fun with React. So this is the same document that we're doing DOM manipulation on in React. There's a couple of style, but those are going to go away fairly soon. And inside of the body, you can see we've got that div class container, and it's got some other things in here. So you've got your app is being rendered inside of the container with some other things. I don't really want to deal with somebody else's CSS, so I'm just going to get rid of that CSS file. App.js we'll go ahead and leave. I'm not going to do any testing today. I'm not going to do any other CSS, so we can get rid of that. I don't really need a logo. Not worried about web vitals. Don't really need to set up tests either. So right now all I have is an index.js and a component called app, and that's it. So I have 3 files that we're dealing with. Nothing more, nothing less. Very quick, very easy. Now, inside of here, inside of our index.js, we don't need the index CSS file. We're going to need the app because that's our component that we're wanting to render. We're not going to do any report web vitals. So all we have is import React DOM, and import app. Now, I don't need this React strict mode, and I don't need these report web vitals. So what I'm doing is I'm passing into the render method a component named app and where I want it to render. So the component named app, we'll take a look at here in a little bit. And the document.querySelector class container. So we're still broken. If you notice, it says no such file or directory, opens users, blah, blah, blah. It says there's no logo.svg. So if we go into app, the first 2 things in here are files that don't exist anymore. So let's get rid of logo SVG and save it. Now it's saying that app.css doesn't exist, so we'll delete that and save it. Now we just have a basic function app. Now in older versions of React, you have to import in your React, and I still do just because it's good practice for right now. Maybe in the future it will change, but I always import my React from React. Even if it's needed or not, it allows me to at least have some peace of mind that it's a React component that I'm working in. Now, when you're returning a component, your component is always one element. So you call this function from index.js right here, and it's going to be returning exactly one element. Now notice you can have as many elements inside of that one element as you want. You can make it a div, you can make it a p, you can make it anything that you want. For me, I'm going to just be returning these 2 elements. Those are called fragments. We'll just say app component. And let's refresh. Okay, so it's now rendered the app component. If you notice, we have these 2 empty elements that are wrapping just some text. So if I go into our body and I look at div class container, it has rendered app component exactly in the HTML that it was told. So it put that right here. It was as if I wrote app component right there. Save it, it's just going to overwrite it anyway. So all it's doing is it's doing that DOM surgery and inserting whatever you want inside of there. So if I change this so that it's something more interesting, like say header, you'll notice when you open up container, it now has a header in there. But if we wanted to do, say, a main here, and say main, you can see it's erroring out like crazy here. This failed to compile. Syntax error: adjacent JSX elements must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. And that's because you're trying to return more than one component at a time. And React doesn't like that. So what you'll see us do is we'll wrap it in either like a div or an empty element. These are called fragments. And so it will return the fragment and still have this header and main structure in there. So you can see now we've got an app component main, and I could even put like a footer in here. We'll just keep that semantic. So I've got app component. We'll say header, like that. So we've got app component header, main, and footer. And we're returning only one element because it's a fragment. And so when we look in here, our structure off the body is a div class container, a header, a main, and a footer. And that's it, nothing more. Very straightforward. So let's go ahead and do a git add, a git commit, and we'll say cleaned. So we'll do a commit saying cleaned up scaffolding from create React app, hit enter. And it'll show you all the files that had changed. So it says 15 files changed, 40 insertions, 193 deletions. So we got rid of readme old, public favorite icon. We rewrote public HTML. 98% of that was changed. We got rid of the logo 192 and 512, manifest.json, robots text. Got rid of app CSS, app test.js. Got rid of your index CSS. Not going to use the logo, and we don't need report web vitals or setup tests for what we're doing today. Maybe later on, maybe in labs, maybe you want to do a progressive web app, you're probably going to use those. But for right now, it's totally unnecessary for us to even have those. Now let's do a push. Origin. So we're going to do a git push origin CRA cleanup. So that's going to be pushing our CRA cleanup into origin, which is GitHub. So now if I go back over here to GitHub, we have cleaned up scaffolding from Create React App. So normally you would have somebody review your code before you merge the pull request, but yeah, we're just gonna go ahead and merge it because I don't have anybody else to do a code review. All right, and then I'm gonna delete my branch because I'm not gonna do a Create React cleanup ever again. Not necessary. It's already cleaned. So now if I go back over to code, our main is now populated with everything that had that pull request pulled into that main. So all of the changes that we just made, it's no longer just the license and a README MD file. So now we have something that we can deploy. And I'm going to go ahead and deploy it with vercel. And you'd have to sign up for a different account and everything else, but that's outside of the scope. But I just want to get this where it's deployed so you can kind of see how GitHub is a very neat way of deploying things to vercel. So each time that you deploy, each time that you do a pull request to main and you merge it, it will redeploy your page. So anytime you have a major change, you're able to see those changes instantly on the live site. So we'll go vercel, login. I think I used my GitHub. Okay, cool. So we'll go ahead and do a new project. And this one was, let's see here. Well, it's in my repository, and then Web 26 Intro React. This should actually be webpt 26, but that's okay. Web 26, I think they graduated back in like February of last year. All right, so we're going to go ahead and import this. Now, we're not going to create a team on this. I'm just going to use my personal account for this. And project name is Web 26 Intro React. It has a framework preset of Create React App, so everything is ready to go. We're in the root directory. That's where everything resides. So if you did a Create React App and then you put it in a subdirectory, this is where you would point it at that subdirectory. And then you can even open these up. This is build command. It's going to do npm run build, which is normal, or React scripts build. And the output directory is going to be build. Environment variables, we don't have any. And so what I can do is I can click on deploy. And now what it's done is it's cloned. And it looked at the source code. It's installing. So it's doing an npm I, or for install. Okay, cool. So it says added all kinds of packages. Congratulations. It's just like being on Robinhood, except they allow you to, well, I guess they don't do anything with GameStop actually. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to visit this page. And so now I've got this live right now, web26-intro-react.vercel.app. That's live for anybody watching. It's even got the page Fun with React. And it's even got no favorite icon or anything. There's no favicon at all. So localhost 3000 versus web26 intro. So that's pretty neat. We got app component header main footer deployed. Totally going to be $1 million idea. So let's see if we can spice this up just a little bit. So let's say that we wanted to use a little bit of state. I know that we covered this a little bit this week. So all state is just a variable. You get a little deeper into things, you can get into state machines, you can get into state objects, you can get into all kinds of things. In this specific case, we're just using state as whatever. It's a variable that we can access. And if we do any changes to that variable, it will re-render the screen. That's the biggest difference between just defining a variable with like a const or a let and one that's run by useState. So we're going to just call this data equals useState. And we're going to pass in an object. And we're going to have a key field of name. We'll just put Brian, because why not? And location, and we're just going to say Texas. All right, so we've got some state, right? We've got an object with two key value pairs. If I try to console log data, what we'll see is some really strange stuff. So what you'll see is that this is an array with two elements in it. So data isn't exactly data. What we have is an array that contains what we want and a setter. So the setter function, all it does is overwrites your object or anything that was in this 0th element. So what you could do if you were trying to break this out, what you could do is you could do let's see, what would we call it? Data content equals data element 0 and data setter equals data on 1. We'll just console log data content, comma, data setter. Now, if we save this, we get our, it's no longer in an array because we pulled the 0th element out and assigned it to another variable. We pulled that function out and assigned it to another variable. So we've got the object that we have here, which is name, location. And then we have this, this function down here. And it's pretty darn unhappy. So instead of doing it this way, what we can do is we can restructure this by wrapping these in square brackets, because the useState function is returning back an array. So if we wrap this, we're creating a new variable named data and a new variable named set data. So those are the two variables that are being returned, and we're giving them names instead of, data element 0 or data element 1. This is just a lot more semantic. So if we wanted to bring this out into its own component, where you have a header component, a main component, and a footer component, what we could do is we could make a new directory, call it components. It doesn't matter if it's uppercase or lowercase, just make sure that you realize that once you've made it, don't change your upper or lowercase, causes lots of problems. And then we'll go ahead and make a new file, header.js. Notice how I'm using a capital H. So now I've got header.js, and we're going to need a few things to make this a React functional component. First thing is we need to import React from React. Second thing is we need a function. I prefer using ES6 functions, so I'm going to define a new variable, and I'm going to call it the same name as the file. So we've got a new variable. We're going to equal this to a function. So we've set a new variable as an arrow function. The next thing that we need to do is we want to export the function, and I want this as the default export. The last thing that makes this a React functional component is it's going to return a JSX element. So when I do a return, I'm going to use parentheses. That denotes that we're in JSX. And I'm just going to save that. We'll go ahead and save this too. Let's see if it explodes. Okay, cool. So we're going to cut the header out and paste it in here. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to need to import our header. So in order to do that, we need to give it a path. So if you remember right, if you remember from earlier, the period is our current directory. As soon as we put in a slash, we're saying it is absolutely this current directory and we're wanting to continue moving forward. So we're going to do /components. I can just hit tab. If I do another slash, we go to header. So we've imported header, still isn't displaying anything because we haven't brought it into our return statement, so it's not rendering. So what we do is we type in header and we self-close it. So slash at the end. So now this is rendering the header from this header file right exactly where we were doing it before. So what this will do, if you have header and nav and everything, if you have another web page that is on a different path in the future, if you do this header, it will always stay up top. You don't have to copy and paste it onto every single web page that you go to, and reduces a lot of work. So let's go ahead and make a main next. So we'll go into components, new file, main, capital M, .js. You'll also sometimes see JSX. It's just the different way of handling the linter in most of the systems. I'm just going to use JS just to make it a little easier, but every once in a while you'll see JSX. It's treated just like a JS file. My preferred is actually using JSX, but it's nice to have. So again, we're looking at the same thing to make a component. We're going to start with import React from React. We're going to make a new variable, set it equal to a function. We're going to export that variable, and we're going to put a return element. So typing practice, everyone. Import React from React. And then we're going to make a new variable, const main, capital M. I'm going to set that variable equal to a function. Export. Export default name. And we need a return. Since we're returning JSX, we're going to be using parentheses, not curly brackets. And we can actually just copy and paste a main here. Just like that. Now our app.js, we're going to need to import our main, and there's some shortcuts that VS Code has given us to be able to do this. So I don't have to go up to the top and start typing import header. I just start typing my element with a capital M. You'll notice that it says main. It says source components main. I click on this, it says import main from /components main. And then I need to self-close it. So if I save this, it'll be in the exact same position as it was before. Let's go ahead and get some more component practice. We'll do a new file. And again, same thing like the header. We need an import statement. Import React from React. We're going to need a new variable. We're going to call this footer. We're going to set that variable to a new function. We're going to export the variable. Export default footer, and we're going to put a return statement. And again, because we're returning JSX, we want parentheses. And I'm just going to copy paste. Save that. And I'm going to do the footer just like I showed before. And then self-close. Okay. So now we have state coming in, which is just an object with a name and a location, and that's it. We've got data and set data. So if we wanted to change this information, we could. We're not going to today because it's just way outside of the scope. And now if we wanted to pass in some information, what we can do is pass things down using a key value pair. So if I wanted to pass down my name, we could equal this to data.name. So this is your key, and this is your value. Now, if you'll notice, we have these curly brackets around this. It's because we're taking a JavaScript value from right here, and we're putting it into this JSX here. And if I want my location, we'll go ahead and do data.location. So we have data.location, and then here we have data.name. So now this right here is what everybody calls props. All props is an object. It's a variable named props that is equal to an object. The stuff that's in there is props.name and props.location. So if I go back over to main and we're passing in a argument, we need to name the parameter. And typically we'll just call it props. Technically, you could call it anything you wanted, but best practice is props. So we're going to console log props. Clear that, refresh. So if you notice, props from main.js line 5, if we wanted to, we could say props equals comma props. And that'll give us a way of seeing that this is the props line. So props is equal to an object with two key value pairs. So the first key is name, second key is location. First value is Brian. Second value is location. So if we wanted to display this, so we could do, say, an H1. And because we're in JSX, we have to escape out of JSX to be able to display any of these variables. So what I want to do is I want to do props.name right there. Save this. Now we've got our name in here. So this is being passed from app, so data.name. We're passing in the value from data.name, so Brian as a string right here. So the key is equal to a string named Brian. Then, the key location here is equal to a string named Texas. So props.name, props.location. And we'll just do, I guess, a P element for this one. And we'll put curly brackets because we want to see the JavaScript in there. Props.location. And we'll save it. So it says app component header Brian Texas footer. We're going to actually push this because we're running low on time. And now we're getting data from our app.js into a child component. There's ways of getting information back up, but that deals with setters, and that'll be a future video for you guys. So right now, our local machine has these changes. Our server out on the web does not. So what I can do is I can do a git checkout -b for a new branch. And we're going to call this add component. So we've got an add components branch. So let's do a git add, a git commit, added components and state. And then we'll do a git push origin. And then this will be add components. So if I go over to here, it'll say add components had recent pushes less than a minute ago. We'll go ahead and compare and pull request. Might as well add myself. I'm going to create the pull request. Normally, you would wait for somebody to validate that the checks, that the code is working. Now that we've added vercel, you can see that says vercel is deploying your app. Oh, something failed. Deployment has failed. Let's see what the details are. See, it says treating warnings as errors because process env CI is equal to true. So any of these errors in here, says set data is assigned a value but never used. So we've actually got to go in and take care of some of these errors, or we need to set our environment variable to CI equals false. So it would probably be easier for us to just set it to false. Let me see if we can find that. Yeah, there we go. So process env CI. So CI is continuous integration. So if you have any warnings, it treats them as errors. So what we can do is go back over here, go into our settings, and go to environment variables. And we're going to do a plain text. We're going to do CI, and the value is going to be false. Save. And I'm just going to go back here, details, click on redeploy. And let's see if this builds. I could be completely wrong. It's been a little while since I've had to do this. So that check made it so that we were able to make sure that it's deployable before we even deploy it. So I can visit a fake site. So this is web 26 intro React, and then a whole bunch of stupid stuff. My name .vercel.app, and it's showing that it's actually deployed. So now if we go back to GitHub, let's go to pull requests. We have this added component and state. it no longer has any errors. So I can merge this. Confirm merge. And I can delete the branch for add components. So now I can refresh this and it doesn't do anything yet because it's still deploying on the back end. So it'll take a few seconds. Or more than a few seconds. Back over to vercel. Yeah, it says it's up. It's just I didn't wait long enough. So no bugs or anything. It went ahead and deployed, but because we didn't have this variable in app, it was setting a warning saying, hey, you have this variable that we're not using. And so it triggered a warning, but it prevented it from deploying because of that. So I had to make an environment variable that basically says, hey, ignore the warnings. It's not that big of a deal. So we have a deployed page out on web26 intro, web26-intro-react.vercel.app that has the current version of this page. It's not super exciting yet, but it's only an hour. And we were able to create a React app. We cleaned up the index HTML and everything in the public folder. We cleaned up the source directory, so it was basically just, well, I think I probably want to move footer back over into components, but it should just be index.js and app.js in there, and I'll clean those and fix that up right now, actually. So footer, if I just drag this over, it's going to cause problems. So it's going to say, are you sure you want to move footer.js into components? Absolutely. So update imports, I'm going to say no. So because of this, a lot of the times what happens is it's looking for footer and it's in the wrong directory. So we're just going to have to point it to components footer. And let's see, okay, that's working. But a lot of the times, if you say yes or yeah, I want it to update paths, it'll throw a huge long string in here and it's going to break things. So anything that you move, you need to know where it is and where you've got it included or imported to see if everything's going to break. So now this will be a bug fix because footer was in the wrong directory. So we're going to make a new branch. Git checkout -b for new branch. And we're going to call this bug fix move footer. We're going to get add and make a comment, move footer into component directory. And we're going to do a git push origin bug fix move footer. And then we'll go back and note that we have the same message. We're going to compare pull request, make sure it's going into main. I guess assign me. create a pull request. We're going to wait for these checks to complete. And merge pull request. Confirm merge. And then I can just delete that branch as well. So now when we go into source, we have our footer, header, and main all in the components directory. And I believe that's that.